June 28, 1969. The Stonewall Inn, a prominent hub for the LGBT community in the Greenwich Village neighborhood of Manhattan, was raided by police from the NYPD's 1st Division. Forced underground by prejudice and discrimination, LGBT people retreated to the bohemian enclave of Greenwich Village, whose bars and clubs were among the few in the city to serve queer clientele. According to a reporter for the New York Daily News, Stonewall became a mecca for the homosexual element in the village who wanted nothing but a private little place.
However, New York City had revoked the liquor license of gay bars, allowing police to legally conduct raids. Patrons of Stonewall saw this as entrapment and discrimination and resisted arrest when the officers demanded that they procure identification. Violence broke out over the next 2 days, and the Stonewall riots came to represent the start of the gay liberation movement.
8 years later, Harvey Milk was elected to San Francisco's board of directors, becoming one of the first openly gay people elected to public office in the United States. In 1978, Milk delivered his famous Hope speech, calling on LGBT people around the world to come out and be more visible in their communities. Although Milk was assassinated later that year, his courage in the face of mass discrimination and his commitment to the gay rights movement has made him a martyr for the cause of equality.
While the gay rights movement is often remembered as a cultural revolution waged on the streets of New York City and San Francisco, Boston contributed intellectual and legal campaigns for queer people during the 1970s and 1980s. Through the combined efforts of prominent gay politicians in the state and national legislators and legal advocates who promoted vigorous judicial proceedings aimed at reversing LGBT discrimination, Boston's LGBT community was able to take a stand against prejudice and discrimination, laying the groundwork for Massachusetts to become a national leader in the fight for equality.
Through the rise of prominent gay and lesbian politicians who represented Massachusetts in the state and national legislatures, the local LGBT community was able to launch an attack on discriminatory policies and ensure the rights of gay people were protected on legal grounds.
What separated the LGBT movement in Boston apart from other cities was the community's understanding that marches and protests could only accomplish so much. If the LGBT community sought real change, they would have to become directly involved in politics.
Starting in 1973, a group of gay lobbyists comprised of Joseph Martin, Anne McGuire, and Elaine Noble began pressuring lawmakers on behalf of the gay rights movement. 1 year later, Elaine Noble decided to run for office herself and was elected to the Massachusetts House of Representatives in 1974. Even in the 1970s, when support for gay rights was far from mainstream, Noble's constituents were willing to separate her personal life from her political qualifications and elect the first openly gay state rep, a testament that the local gay community's insistence on the visibility of gay people in everyday life as well as politics was working.
Perhaps the most influential gay legislator in the United States, Barney Frank became involved in politics in 1972 when he ran for Massachusetts state legislator. Though a closeted gay man, Frank supported the LGBT rights movement, even at the risk of public speculation about his sexuality. When he did come out during a 1987 interview, however, he found acceptance and was actually praised for his courage by conservatives in Congress in Massachusetts. Eventually, Frank became the first member of Congress to marry a person of the same sex when he and his partner Jim Reddy wed in 2012. And, after Steve Largent, a Republican congressman from Oklahoma, argued that gay marriage was detrimental to the institution of marriage, Frank famously responded that this was the argument of someone who ought to be in an institution. By holding a position in Congress, Frank became an intermediary between the LGBT community and the federal legislative body, providing a voice for the millions of queer people across the country.
During the 1980s, as the AIDS epidemic devastated the LGBT community across the country and fear and prejudice towards gay people ran rampant, representatives in Massachusetts were gripped by a legislative battle which would chart a new course for liberalism in the state and forever come to characterize the fight for equality. In the 1980s, an increasingly visible LGBT community in Massachusetts began campaigning for gays and lesbians to become an affirmative actions group, thereby ensuring them a seat on the Democratic State Committee. The proposal was heralded by David Scondrus, a gay member of the Boston City Council who stated, "Massachusetts Democrats must send a message. We are the party of all the people, or I guarantee you we will be the party of no one." Through their increased visibility, LGBT people effectively changed the course of the Democratic Party, as social liberalism began to take root among the party's core values. The 1985 Affirmative Action Amendment was overwhelmingly defeated, mainly due to vocal opposition from Governor Michael Dukakis' political organization, who argued that sexual orientation was a private matter that should be left out of politics. The gay community in Massachusetts suffered another devastating blow that year when the state's House of Representatives voted to ban the Department of Social Services from placing foster children in the care of openly gay couples. After Social Services temporarily placed 2 children in the care of a Roxbury couple, Donald Babbitts and David Jean, widespread condemnation erupted. Representative Switzler Wellesley even argued that the men's homosexual preferences presented the possibility of physical or psychological harm to the children. Despite such setbacks, the gay community was left undeterred in their quest for equal rights. In 1988, gay activists chained themselves to the Senate gallery floor to protest the filibustering of a bill that still seemed years away. But just 1 year later, an anti-discrimination bill was successfully passed and signed into law by Governor Dukakis, allowing Massachusetts to become the second state in the nation to pass a law prohibiting discrimination against homosexuals in employment, housing credit, and public accommodations. The decision ensured that gay people would receive equal treatment under the law, but more importantly, it acted as a catalyst, inspiring neighboring states to update their stance on homosexuality and providing the legal backing that the gay community needed to effectively fight discrimination.
Legal advocacy groups were soon formed throughout the city to combat discrimination and protect the rights of LGBT people. In March of 1978, after the arrest of 103 men for supposed indecent exposure at the Boston Public Library, GLAAD, or Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, emerged to defend the accused. GLAAD filed a suit, known as Doe v. McNiff, on behalf of one of the men arrested at the library, alleging that his civil rights had been violated due to the illegal practice of entrapment utilized by the Boston Police Department. Suspected gay men were approached by plainclothes officers who offered sexual favors. Men who agreed were immediately arrested and charged with prostitution or open and gross lewdness. Despite being unfounded, such tactics were commonly used to brand gay people as promiscuous and sexually deviant. The charge of open and gross lewdness was originally used to convict rapists, yet was being used against men who engaged in consensual homosexual acts. Those charged with such crimes often pleaded guilty as they were too embarrassed to appear in court. However, GLAAD's counseling provided gay people in Boston the chance to defend themselves against such accusations and protect their constitutional rights to due process in a trial. GLAAD was successful in its efforts to combat illegal police activity against LGBT people, and the case inspired the formation of the Boston Boise Committee, a local gay and lesbian activist organization against anti-gay initiatives. On April 1, 1978, 200 of those supporters gathered on the Boston Public Library steps to protest the settlement and increased police surveillance, with many chanting, "Gays pay taxes too," or "Dump the district attorney." These revolutionary inklings provided the inspiration for future GLAAD initiatives, such as the 1984 letter by lawyer Scott Harshbarger to the Middlesex District Attorney. Harshbarger refuted the idea that consensual acts between gay adults constituted a threat to public safety, and suggested that instead of harassing innocent civilians for their lifestyles, police should spend their time pursuing actual criminals.
In May 1980, GLAAD lawyer John Ward took up the case of Aaron Frick, a senior at Rhode Island's Cumberland High School who was told he'd be denied access to prom if he brought another male as a date. Richard B. Lynch, the school's principal, claimed he had barred Frick from attending prom out of fear for his safety, yet he had done nothing in the past to protect Aaron from the constant physical harassment he endured at school. Despite enduring the taunts of his peers and town residents, who referred to gays as dirty human beings and monsters, Frick stood up for his right to attend prom with whomever he chose, regardless of their gender.
However, by comparing Frick's circumstance to the segregation of black students in Southern schools, GLAAD's lawyers successfully argued that this policy was blatant discrimination. Judge Patine then concluded that Frick's First and 14th Amendment rights to freedom of association and expression were violated, making Aaron Frick's tumult a landmark case. Gay rights were now being seen as basic human rights protected under the Constitution. Through the combined efforts of activists and lawyers in the Boston area, discriminatory policies were fought through the court systems, providing legal precedents that allowed for the further expansion of gay rights in the coming decades.
The infiltration of the activist culture that existed on college campuses and Boston's culture of intellectualism allowed for local college students to spearhead the gay rights movement. Local high schools were involved as well, such as the Gay Straight Alliance at Mahar High School in Orange, Massachusetts, which fought with town residents for the right to fly a pride flag in front of their school. The LGBT community itself also adopted an internal culture of intellectualism, publishing protest flyers, the Gay Community News, and Fag Rag, which kept the community informed and provided gay intellectuals with a creative outlet to craft essays, poems, and short stories about their experiences as queer people. Like no other city in the country, Boston's LGBT community maintained a distinctly intellectual essence, captivating the intelligence of the city and channeling it into a means of fighting for the rights of LGBT people.
Boston's strides in the LGBT movement catalyzed the fight for gay rights across the country. On February 10, 1992, Governor William F. Weld created the Governor's Commission on Gay and Lesbian Youth, which prohibited discrimination based on sexual orientation in public schools. These steps eventually led to Massachusetts becoming the first state in the nation to legalize same-sex marriage in 2004, which laid the foundation for the U.S. Supreme Court's ultimate decision to do so nationwide on June 26, 2015. The 1970s and 1980s LGBT movement in Boston was characterized by brave politicians and community members who inspired intellectual and legal reforms by taking a stand against the intolerance of the time, making Massachusetts a national leader in the struggle for equality. Though the fight is far from over, by learning from the courageous actions of these advocates laced throughout history, people can continue to take a stand against the intolerance and discrimination of today for a more inclusive future.